Hello, welcome to today's webinar on successful approaches to setting project development budgets. This webinar is one of a series hosted by the AASHTO Technical Committee on Project Management. I'm Patricia Bush, Program Manager for Bridges and Design at AASHTO, and today's host. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes to help you enjoy today's session. All attendees are automatically muted for the entire webinar. If you have questions at any point during the presentations, you can submit them by using the Q&A button on your Zoom webinar control panel. We will answer them as time allows at the end of the webinar. This session is being recorded, and the link will be made available on the Technical Committee on Project Management webpage. You can easily navigate to it by going to transportation.org, going to Committee on Design, and then selecting Project Management from the menu on the left. PDF of today's presentation will be made available on the TCPM webpage. An email with a PDH certificate will be sent to all attendees later today. If you can't find it, be sure to check your spam or junk folders. Download the certificate and keep it for your records. Now I will turn things over to Steve Boge, Assistant Highway Program Manager with the Maine Department of Transportation. Steve serves on a variety of AASHTO committees and technical committees and was a panel member for this domestic scan. Steve?
Thank you, Tricia. As Tricia said, my name is Steve Boge. I'll be presenting Albert, our speaker for today. I'll also be running the question and answer session for the back half of the program today after the presentation. My background is I am a graduate of the University of Maine in civil engineering, and I have over 20 years of experience here at the Maine Department of Transportation. I've had many positions such as a highway designer, a bridge designer, project manager, and currently the Assistant Highway Program Manager. I am a member of the AASHTO Committee on Design, also the AASHTO Technical Committee on Roadside Safety, and most importantly for today, the AASHTO Technical Committee on Project Management. That's the committee that's hosting this quarterly webinar series for you folks. I'll be monitoring the questions, and we will hold all of them to the end. We'll let Albert get through the presentation, and we'll answer them, him and I together, like I said, in the second half of the presentation. During today's webinar, we will present the results of a recent domestic scan that was completed called Successful Approaches to Setting Project Development Budgets. It is pretty clear that many agencies out there have established techniques for estimating construction costs, but this scan was focused on those costs prior to construction, those costs that come about during the development stages of a project, including during the planning phase. For those of you who are not familiar with a domestic scan, it's a program that's been around for a number of years that literally sends a chosen committee to scan the nation looking for best practices on a subject with the intention of disseminating those results. This scan happened during COVID, unfortunately, so it was 100% virtual, which was different than traveling around the country, but it also had some advantages as well. One advantage was the ability for Albert and our scan team to interview a larger number of agencies in a much shorter amount of time using Zoom and other such uses. At this time, I'll introduce Albert Shelby. Albert Shelby was a member also of the Technical Committee on Project Management and a member of the SCAN team that will be presenting the results today. Albert is an Atlanta, Georgia native that graduated from Southern Polytechnic State University with a degree in civil engineering technology. He began his career at Georgia DOT in 1998. Over his career, he has served in the Office of Urban Design as a design engineer and design group manager, and in the Office of Program Delivery as a senior project manager, an assistant office head, as well as the office head. His current position is the Director of Program Delivery. At this time, take it away, Albert.
Thank you, Steve. And I will share my screen to put on the presentation. All right, so as Steve has said, my name is Albert Shelby. I'm the Director of Program Delivery at the Georgia Department of Transportation. Today, we'll be presenting a topic on successful approaches to setting project development budgets as a part of the AASHTO Technical Committee on Project Management webinar series. Special thanks to Mr. Steve Boge, Director of Engineering and Project Manager for the Maine Department of Transportation, who is also on the scan and is a member of this committee. All right, let's see if we can move it along. There we go. So this scan was conducted as part of the NCHRP Project 20-68, the U.S. Domestic Scan Program. The Domestic Scan Program was requested by the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, AASHTO, with funding provided by the National Cooperative Highway Research Program. The reason for the scan was due to a perpetual challenge facing state transportation agency planners formulating the state's transportation capital programs with reliable project development budgets for candidate projects. While years of experience and analytical tools inform estimation of projects' construction costs, current practices for estimating costs of internal staff salaries and external consultant services for pre-construction activities such as scope development, environmental documentation, site investigation and analysis, preliminary engineering and final design, public engagement, and project management tend to be much more susceptible to uncertainty. The scan provided an opportunity to examine how leading states have been successful in providing accurate total capital investment project cost estimates. This will provide stakeholders and decision makers a more accurate picture of the true cost of a project and impact the ability to deliver projects within budget. Some agencies are viewed by their peers as having developed more successful procedures for setting project development budgets. The objective of the scan is to provide documents that the best practices of these leading agencies and extract lessons learned that may be adapted to other agencies and applied to direct further improvements of budget development practices nationwide. Some key factors that were investigated by the scan include how agencies address budgeting project development, processes used for final project scope development and approval, successful approaches to addressing pre-construction risk, and an assessment of the accuracy of those budgets developed by the agencies for practices and lessons learned. A 9-member team from state departments of transportation and Federal Highway Administration participated in the scan. The team members are listed on the screen here. In addition to the 7 state DOTs and the Central Federal Lands of FHWA that participated as team members, there were 5 additional state DOTs that participated by making presentations and submitting materials. Those state DOTs were California, Nevada, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. The scan was conducted online with 13 individual agency presentations done during a 1-week period. Scan team members and other participating states observed the presentations and engaged in question and answer sessions following each presentation. The scan team identified successes, challenges, and new ideas after the presentations. The following week, the scan team met to identify the most significant findings and recommendations. The following slides describe the findings, observations, and recommendations that were identified. Some general findings that we saw. Caltrans and Minnesota DOT both indicated that they have determined that non-construction related work makes up approximately 30% of the total project costs. Nearly half of the agencies that participated established budgets for total project costs, including phases of project delivery, such as scope development, preliminary engineering, environmental assessments, final design, utility, relocations, right-of-way activities, public engagement, etc. Some of these agencies set these budgets early and kept them in place throughout project development. This is difficult to do accurately and requires more care and effort during the initial scoping process. Several of the agencies adjusted estimates and budgets at particular milestones, 30%, 60%, 90%, as well as preliminary plan specs and estimates submittal, as well as annually. 3 states stated that more time and effort spent upfront in scoping and estimating can be beneficial in the long run by resulting in fewer changes and better designs. Some agencies use different methods of scope development and estimating based on the size and complexity of the projects. Nevada DOT uses an Excel-based tool called Wizard to develop initial planning level scopes and estimates for projects using the type, size, and complexity of projects. Minnesota DOT, Oregon DOT, as well as Washington State DOT stated that they use more experienced staff to perform the scoping, as it tends to reduce problems later on. However, this can be a challenge as these are often the staff needed to get the project to a letting. The Maine DOT uses a variety of functional committees to scope projects to get a variety of perspectives. Michigan DOT mentioned that they use an early preliminary engineering phase prior to programming the construction phase, which can potentially identify issues early on and provide high-level cost estimates on the complex projects. An overwhelming majority of the agencies that participated in the scan estimate project development and construction engineering costs using a standard percentage or ratio of its estimated capital construction cost. As such, agencies often spend more time and effort estimating construction costs than project development costs. However, Caltrans and Central Federal Lands both use a bottom-up method of estimating construction costs and project development costs. Caltrans also uses top-down tools that identify similar projects to confirm estimates. Several agencies, including Caltrans, Central Federal Lands, Texas DOT, and Wisconsin DOT, consider similar components in their cost estimates, including base cost, risk, escalation for inflation, and known and unidentified risks. These contingencies reduce the amount as the letting approaches and as more is known about a particular project. GDOT, Maine DOT, MDOT, and VDOT also use AstroWare software modules in their construction estimating, cost estimating, and project development processes. VDOT recently completed a study of the cost estimating procedures. As a result, they created a centralized estimating office to improve the capability and consistency of their cost estimating processes. MDOT recently completed an analysis of the actual cost of PE as a percentage of construction costs. As a result, they plan to adjust their percentages used for PE and CE for various work types and ranges of construction costs. TxDOT and Washington State DOT both indicated that design-build construction creates challenges for estimating costs. To begin, it is difficult to apply bid history since the agency must rely on the developer to provide information on pay items. Finally, the use of design-build doesn't contribute to the recent history of bid data. Several agencies incorporate risk-based contingency in project development estimates to quantify risks. Caltrans adds amounts for risk based on project type and cost. Central Federal Lands uses a risk identification questionnaire to identify risk characteristics for most projects. More sophisticated tools are also used by Central Federal Lands staff that require knowledge of risk principles. ODOT, PennDOT, TxDOT, UDOT, and Wisconsin DOT also include processes to evaluate risk for projects. Several agencies conduct risk workshops where subject matter experts provide their experience and expertise to evaluate the risk for specific projects. Some agencies utilize risk-specific contracts to assist with conducting risk analysis to evaluate risk and constructability. These contracts are said to provide a valuable second opinion. The risk to project schedules should be considered for high-profile and complex projects. Agencies use a variety of tools to estimate risk. Caltrans has a user-friendly spreadsheet that is integrated into their risk model. ODOT has modified its cost estimating template to include risk tools. Later, during design, a probabilistic risk-based estimate replaces the contingency from the worksheet. TxDOT uses a risk-based cost estimating tool that is Microsoft Excel-based and is used to evaluate projects at each stage of development. Caltrans described how it documents lessons learned, actual resources used, and ways that anticipated risk can can eliminate or mitigate during the closeout process. Agencies have developed dashboards to communicate project and program status with staff, leadership, and the public. Several agencies use dashboards to track and report estimates, budgets, and expenditures throughout the life of a project. These tools provide a way to quickly identify if projects are on schedule and within budget. The Maine DOT developed a GIS-enabled dashboard using Oracle Business Intelligence software adapted to their way of doing business. TxDOT uses dashboards that monitor cost estimates. This information is filtered by districts to provide reports. Utah DOT has several reports on its dashboard. One of these reports shows projects that are more than 10% over budget. Many of the dashboards have been designed and built in-house. Some of these systems using Excel-based programs have challenges sharing information with other data systems. Virginia DOT uses customized project schedule templates developed in-house to guide staff regarding schedules for projects. Most agencies have developed tools and data systems to aid in estimating and tracking project development and construction costs. Maine DOT uses a customized database called Project to track and report estimates. It is estimated with a work plan management process to monitor project status. GDOT uses Primavera P6 to schedule projects. Consultants are evaluated on their ability to meet these schedules. Consultant performance is then used to evaluate their eligibility for future work. PennDOT's multimodal project management system is a database used to develop the State Transportation Improvement Plan and project budgets. PennDOT also has an engineering and construction management system used for the bidding process and to validate project estimates. Texas DOT has developed an integrated project management system called TxDOT Connect that manages the delivery of transportation projects and programs. It provides a one-stop location for all project information, including estimates for project development phases. Several agencies are planning to update or replace legacy systems to incorporate and integrate project development programs and systems. Many of these systems were built in-house and are not integrated with other important systems. Updating these systems will be costly and time-consuming, requiring a great deal of planning and effort. Several agencies indicated that they use former construction estimators or consultants, which are sometimes referred to as independent cost estimators, to provide a contractor perspective using bottom-up estimating. This also typically provides an independent review of the constructability of the project. This type of analysis is normally reserved for more costly and complex projects. Rapidly changing market conditions are a challenge. Wisconsin DOT said that 93% of costs of materials, labor, and equipment has increased year over year. Utah DOT indicated they have a statewide contract that hires former construction contractors to provide advance notice of market conditions that will affect projects and issues related to materials that may impact their cost availability. Use of contractors and independent cost estimators during design is also utilized. North Carolina DOT said that they sometimes use a contractor to work with the designers to improve constructability and reduce project costs. At the same time, they may also hire an independent cost estimator to provide a schedule for working days and a bottom-up cost estimate. Balanced portfolio of projects can lower costs. ODOT said that having a more balanced portfolio of projects, such as a wide variety of project types utilizing more contractors, can actually help lower bids during the letting process. ODOT also stated that they engage with individual contractors one-on-one to discuss projects. These meetings without competitors present results in a more open and honest discussion. In communicating with stakeholders, they use a range of estimates. Wisconsin DOT pointed out the importance of communicating an estimate as a range. It was emphasized that even with great effort, it is not possible to know the final cost of a project until all the work is complete. If possible, it is advised to communicate an estimate as a range of values to avoid implying unwarranted accuracy. Wisconsin DOT further recommends using the risk modeling results, including the total project cost with project development costs inflated to the year of expenditure. During the scan, the team observed different terms being used for the same processes and procedures. This can cause confusion and should be avoided. Agencies said that peer exchanges have helped to share information, methods, and best practices. These exchanges can be internal with partners, vendors, or sister agencies. Utah DOT has a site called Estimators Corner that shares information regarding the local and regional construction markets. A couple of agencies are using earned value to monitor projects. Caltrans uses earned value as a flagging device that ties schedules and resources to identify problems with projects early on. Central Federal Lands also uses earned value to monitor the health of a project. An earned value report uses a schedule performance index and a cost performance index to determine if the schedule or budget is behind planned values. A change management process is recommended to proactively manage project budgets and schedules and keep the focus on project delivery. Caltrans uses their staff for a large percentage of project development in the state system. They indicate the importance of having an attitude of an owner-operator working for the Transportation Commission as a way to reliably maintain internal budgets and schedules. Another innovation that was discussed by PennDOT was the use of digital 3D models for plan delivery. These models have the potential to provide more accurate quantities that can improve estimates. PennDOT is also investigating the use of 4D and 5D models to potentially improve scheduling and cash flow analysis. New methods and tools, such as earned value, bottom-up estimating, and dashboards, can require significant commitment and institutional change. Several agencies have invested time and effort to implement new tools and methods. These improvements can provide benefits, but require significant time, expense, and commitment. In some cases, they may even require institutional change. The use of standard templates, data systems, and tools for project scoping and cost estimating is a best practice that should be employed. It is recommended that manuals developed to guide the scoping process require a review of statewide plans and standards to ensure the consistency of project scopes to those standards. The use of an early preliminary engineering phase as part of the development process prior to programming the construction phase is recommended for more complex projects to identify issues early, such as environmental risks, potential right-of-way acquisition, etc. The use of an owner's scope contract performed by a consultant to perform scoping and cost estimating can be beneficial in providing a different perspective and supplementing in-house resources. The use of former construction estimators or consultants with expert knowledge from a contractor's perspective to verify estimate schedules and review constructability can be beneficial. Sharing planning level tools for scoping and estimating with local agencies can improve their project proposals. Agency cost estimating manuals and materials should be developed and updated regularly. The use of a flat percentage of capital construction costs for estimating the cost of project development and construction engineering based on historic averages is an appropriate tool to use for typical non-complex projects with significant history. A uniform policy on escalation, inflating costs to the midpoint of the phase is recommended to provide consistent guidance across all projects. Training and guidance should be considered to assist those project managers. Cost estimating programs and systems should capture history and assumptions for future reference. The basis of estimate should be updated at milestones, regular reviews, or annually, whichever comes first. Focus more attention on those 20% of items that result in up to 80% of the costs or more risk during scoping and project development. Agencies should include risk-based contingencies to account for unknown and identified risks. A risk analysis for project schedules should be considered for high profile and complex projects. Development of a robust risk assessment approach that is scalable to total project cost and or complexity is recommended. A project closeout process that documents lessons learned, actual resources used, and the effectiveness of the ways that anticipated risks were eliminated or mitigated is recommended. Consider a separate risk contract to develop a risk registry and schedule to use throughout the life of the project and quantify outside factors that might particularly impact the project's cost or schedule. While the cost of constructing a major portion of project costs, the cost of project development is significant and should also be considered and budgeted. Dashboards and tools to budget and track project development costs in addition to construction costs will communicate progress to decision makers and the public and assist agencies to identify actual resource needs to deliver the program. Project costs should be compared to the planning estimates to identify problems early so that necessary action can proactively be taken. A change management process should be employed to aid in keeping projects on schedule and within budget. Such a process will provide improved accountability and transparency. Implementation of earned value analysis that reports and ties schedules and resources can be beneficial in identifying potential issues early on, but can require significant commitment and institutional change. It is important to establish a mindset of an owner-operator to effectively budget and track in-house project costs. This will strike a balance between delivering near-perfect projects and working within established schedules and budgets. Programs and systems that talk to each other are beneficial to sharing information and saving historic data for future reference. It is important to consider technology costs, data security, maintenance, and data quality. Updating and replacing legacy project development systems is important, but costly and time-consuming, and should be done with significant planning and deliberation. And here's the information where this particular U.S. domestic scan is available. And with that, we can take any questions.
So at the bottom of your screen, you should have a bar with a Q&A button on it. Feel free to go ahead and write your questions right inside of that right now. We have a couple to get started, Albert. First one is, what size of projects were discussed and or focused on during this scan? Are we talking all size projects or more bigger projects, or what were we thinking about during the scan?
So we allowed the different states to come with their whole programs to discuss them. Most of the discussion is centered around larger, more complex projects, arterial widenings, interchanges, things of that nature. The smaller projects, everybody pretty much had the same approach to, let's say, roundabouts or intersection improvements by using historical data, because you tend to do a lot of those within the states. Anything to add, Steve?
No, I think you're right. For the most part, we focused on the larger projects. Those are the ones that are gonna have the biggest impacts on your portfolio and the such.
And we did focus on the design bid build processes. Design build was strayed away quite a bit because those are more unique in nature for cost estimating purposes.
Correct. So we have one here, Albert, kind of specific, but you may recall, you may not. We may have to look it up. But how does Wisconsin DOT or any other DOT provide guidance on setting the ranges that are reported for conceptual/early cost estimates? Do you remember that one specifically, Albert?
I don't remember that level of specificity. We'd have to look that up in their presentation.
Next question is, what are some of the specific risks identified by these agencies that I should be looking out for. So I guess, Albert, we'd probably be looking for maybe the top 4 or 5 rather than try to go through the whole gamut. But so specific risks that these agencies should be looking out for.
And most of it was related to the federal process, right? So it was the costs of right-of-way, the costs of utility impacts. A lot of people focused on stakeholder engagement, making sure there's buy-in by their constituencies. And then obviously just the cost of construction itself was a big one. Just not knowing what you don't know, and trying to figure out ways.
To add a little bit on that stakeholder engagement, I mean, much larger projects are going to need, a number of different meetings. So they have to plan for all of the associated things that go with that. And that could drag on for some amount of time, especially given any type of controversial or that type of project. So you want to be able to think about those, before you get into a situation.
Yeah. Impacts to property is also one that should be identified and looked at early on because it can get expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. You stated that meetings took place in some states with the contractors themselves. Is that allowed by federal highway rules? And I'm not an expert on the rules, but I know that we do it in Maine. We have a contractor input during design process where we bring them in. I do think we end up shortlisting them to be the potential bidders on those projects. But yeah, I do believe it's allowed. I mean, you may have to communicate with your federal highway office, and a lot of things that us as agencies want to do, we have to communicate through our federal highway partners and make sure that they give us a thumbs up. But don't be afraid to try things, because a lot of these federal highway offices are willing to work with us, and they're just trying to get the job done like we are. So anything to add, Albert?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I don't think it's a federal rule sort of thing. It's more not giving a particular contractor an unfair advantage by seeing something ahead of other low bidders. But again, that can be a conversation. And some states actually have laws that restrict it to a certain level. We can't, at Georgia, can't really do it very easily. It's more because our contractors association is just really strong, and they don't want to give any one person too much of a competitive advantage.
So we had a question. Can you go ahead and put the link in the chat box? And we have done that. Thank you. Thank you, Trish. The link to the actual PDF document is over there in the chat box, so feel free to download. We had another question. Albert, can you share one more time your last page for that information page?
Yes.
I think the link would do it, but I think it's worth putting back up there one more time, and then I'll go on to the next question. The one just before that, if you can.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Uh-oh, sorry, hold on.
That's all right.
I can get it. Can you see it?
I do. That works. That works. So the next question in the Q&A, and I'm down to a couple, so feel free to type those in if you folks have any. Albert, are there any findings on how to estimate for multi-year construction projects? Is one question, and it has going to have a related question, and guidance on how to figure that out, or what percentages are being applied in that aspect. So talking about multi-year construction projects, which, would be our run-of-the-mill complex projects probably.
Right, and we estimate, we don't necessarily put any additional inflators on multi-year sorts of projects. Every once in a while, I've heard in Georgia and in some other states where they index certain components such as asphalt to battle against inflation, but that's actually pretty rare. We usually just cost out these projects as they are and bid them out to the contractors, and they add their level of risk for multi-year construction.
Yeah, we do something similar up here in Maine. It's we try to estimate in today's prices, and then just expect that, you know, for a 2-year project, it's going to be a little bit of risk, and we try to figure that out using a contingency. But there's really no rhyme or reason. We didn't really get into a lot of construction estimating either. Let's not forget the scan was more about those costs prior to construction. So we apologize for not having a perfect answer on the construction aspect of a project, multi-years. So that is the last of the questions typed in the Q&A. I give folks another minute or two if they want to get them in there.
Could you guys talk a little bit about the domestic scan program in general, what it was like being on the panel, and how those differ maybe from the regular NCHRP projects?
You want to do that, Albert, first?
Well, it's hard for me to talk about, you know, the differences. It was my first scan. So it was, you know, done virtually, and you know, I thought done very well virtually, talking to multiple states and being able to get people in the room to go through their presentations. But I don't have a frame of reference as to how it was different than, you know, flying from state to state to do these scans prior to COVID.
Yeah, it was also my first scan, but I also talked to somebody in my agency who's done multiple scans in the past, and it was kind of a luxury to be able to get 13 agencies interviewed within a week's time. That was pretty impressive. Obviously, you know, if you're flying even to a region of the state or 3 regions of the state and trying to gather those folks, you can see how that could take weeks and things like that. The downside of not being able to travel, not being able to sit in these DOTs is they can't bring in a half a dozen people and show you exactly what they're talking about and get into, you know, some finer details. So I think probably Albert and I missed out on some of the finer details that we were probably trying to dig into in the long run. The difference between a scan and an NCHRP panel, for me, I have done both of those. Is the scan is really we're doing all of the questions. We're sending out invitations for different agencies to be answer a few amplifying questions, and then we basically rate and say, yeah, we want you to be one of the agencies that answers questions for our scan. We want to interview you, say, in 3 weeks or whatnot. Whereas the NCHRP panel, the research is defined, and we have to, as a panel, go and write the RFP, similar to, you know, what most of us project managers do day in and day out, and then select the best research group or research entity that is willing to try to do that project for us. So in essence, a little bit different. We're kind of running the show when we're in the scan, and we're kind of trying to find somebody else to run the show when we're doing an NCHRP project. So that's how they're a little bit different, Trish. And I think we're going to finish this one a little bit early. Thank you, everybody, for attending this webinar series put on by the Technical Committee on Project Management. We will have another one approximately 3 months out as we do these quarterly. We hope to see you next time. Trish, any comments I need to make before I finish?
Nope, that's all. The next one's on July 27th.
July 27th. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good afternoon.